You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us. Hi, thanks for joining us this week for some Fresh Hell. I'm Annie. I live in a large, moist pothole about 10 miles from downtown Boston.
And I'm Johanna. I live with a disturbing yet very ineffective scarecrow in an empty field several kilometers from Vienna.
Nice. So, listen, before we start, we wanted to send our thoughts and love to the people of Lebanon. That blast in Beirut, the cause of it, it's shocking and devastating, and we are thinking of you.
Yes, absolutely. We will be making a donation with the Austrian charity Nachbar in Not for the people in Lebanon on behalf of all of our Hellions as well.
Absolutely. I used to work in fundraising, and I know that lots of smaller donations are just as important as big ones that you get. So every little bit helps.
It does. And you look at the photos and how much the people have already accomplished.
It's amazing. All right.
So 2 things we want to mention before we start. First of all, thank you to our Hellion Alex, who made us 2 friendship bracelets and sent it over to me, and Ennis is already on the way to her.
Yeah, thank you. He sent me a photo of it, so I can't wait to see it in person. It looks absolutely lovely. Thank you so much, Alex. Yeah. The other thing, we had well over 100 people joined our Facebook group on Saturday, and that was in a few hours. And Johanna and I were just so confused because usually we have like 30 people a week joining.
Yeah, at first I thought it's like bots.
I know. Like, oh no, we're being infiltrated. But yeah, I think it turns out that some of our Hellions had posted links to our group somewhere, and so a whole bunch of new people have found us. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your support so much.
Yes, thank you. It really helps us to grow our audience. Okay, so that's all. And I think we could get into today's episode. What do you have for us today, Annie?
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about a murder. And I remember first seeing this case on Unsolved Mysteries. So if you've seen that episode, some of this may sound a bit familiar, but we have a little bit more information for you. And some of it is, it makes the case a little bit sadder. Today we're going to be talking about the murder of Cam Lyman. And there aren't really any warnings. It's just the story of a man who was murdered, and whose case I just haven't seen properly covered anywhere. He seemed like somebody you and I would have been friends with, and just everything I've read about the case makes me a little sad about how the people who should have loved and supported him let him down. But to be fair, it was a different time. And, obviously we don't have all the details, so we're not judging anybody. I'm not judging anybody. I'm not saying that makes any of it okay, but I'm just going to try my best to tell his story with just a little bit more dignity than I've seen done in other places.
Well, sounds good to me, so I'm ready. Tell me everything.
All right. And apologies if you hear, thunder in the background. All right. So some of our Boston area listeners might have recognized the name Lyman. The Lyman Estate in Waltham, it's some serious house porn. I've been to a number of events there, and if you have seen the most recent film adaptation of Little Women, it's where in the beginning of the film, Joe meets Laurie. So here's some information on the Lyman Estate. This is directly from the Historic New England website. Quote, "The Lyman Estate, also known as the Vale, is a National Historic Landmark and one of the finest U.S. examples of a country estate following 18th century English naturalistic design. In 1793, shipping merchant Theodore Lyman commissioned famed architect Samuel McIntyre to design and build a Federal-style house for his family. The family enlarged the house in 1882 in the Victorian style and then remodeled it in the Colonial Revival style in 1917. The 37 acres include beautifully preserved gardens and historic greenhouses. Hear the story of the Lyman family during a tour of the mansion, which is used today as a venue for weddings and corporate events. Its architectural features include a graceful oval parlor and elegant ballroom, which can be seen in the 2019 film adaptation of Little Women. Stop by the Lyman Estate greenhouses for beautiful plants and expert advice." End quote. So I've been there for work events, and I've actually bought beautiful plants there that I've since murdered, but I never did the tour, and I don't know if it mentions I would guess it's not going to mention anything to do with the murder, but if we ever get to a safe place, virus-wise, we should go and take the tour. But I have a little bit more on those greenhouses. I know some of you will find this interesting. And this is just from Wikipedia, but this is all true. Quote, "The estate's first greenhouse was constructed before 1800 and is thought to be the oldest in the United States. The grape house, built in 1804 to raise exotic fruits such as oranges, pineapples, and bananas, today houses extensive grapevines grown from cuttings taken in 1870 from Hampton Court in England. The Camellia House was built around 1820 for cultivation of camellias, introduced to America via Europe in 1797 from coastal China, Japan, and Korea. Many of the Lyman camellias are more than 100 years old. The greenhouses are open to the public." End quote. So I'm going to post some photos and links to the home and gardens. They're really, it's beautiful.
It sounds lovely, and I definitely need to check out the photos of the estate.
Yeah, you're going to love it. It's nice. You wouldn't be mad if you inherited it. Let's put it that way. It was built by Cam's great something grandfather. The Lymans were a very wealthy, well-known family, and this was mostly their summer house. Their main residence was, of course, near the State House in downtown Boston. So, old Boston money, Boston Brahmin money. I found a really good quote from John Collins Bossidy. He was a Holy Cross alum who made this toast at an alumni dinner, and it was published in the Springfield Republican newspaper. So, to quote him, "And this is good old Boston, the home of the bean and the cod, where the Lowells talk only to Cabots, and the Cabots talk only to God." End quote. So, my dad's gonna like that quote.
I could have guessed. I myself just thought what a great quote, and as your dad and I are on the same page on many things.
Oh yeah,
it was
definitely.
Obvious.
Yep. But it's just serious money, like WASP. Do you know the term WASPs? Like white?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And then sometimes they say wealthy now, I think, instead of white. But, very old money, English descent, very incestuous in terms of these old families making matches for their children to grow land and wealth. That kind of, I think you and I, never in this class, it was never about making the right match, but that was very much the world they lived in. And Cam's grandparents and great-grandparents there were Lowells and Cabots among them. Cam Lyman was born Camilla Lowell Lyman on September 4th, 1932 in Westwood, Massachusetts. At the time, the wealthy Boston suburb had around 3,000 people for its population, and today it's around 16,000. And until 2005, it was a dry town, so no liquor stores or no restaurants serving alcohol. After Prohibition, some towns just decided to keep booze illegal, and so occasionally you'll run into towns throughout the U.S. where there are no liquor stores and no bars. It's getting less common now, though. So Westwood was also the site of the first pound, and you're probably thinking Animal Pound, and you're right, but less puppies, more horses and cows. So the large stone walls were made to keep wandering livestock. So if you went out in the morning to milk your cow and she was gone, you'd take yourself over to the pound and see if anybody had put her in there for safekeeping. It was also sort of the place where any lost item would be turned in. It was just a big lost and found for the town. The stone walls remain, and they are circa 1700 and are among the many historic stone walls all over New England. They're just everywhere. So, Camilla's parents were Arthur and Margaret Perkins Rice Lyman. Arthur had served as the Commissioner of Conservation and as the Commissioner of Corrections for the state of Massachusetts, but not at the same time. That was at different points in his career. Camilla was the youngest of 4 children, with an older brother and 2 older sisters, but it seemed their father was particularly close to the tall, awkward, dog-loving Camilla. The family were known for their hobbies, which included horticulture, dog breeding, horseback riding, the usual Richie Rich stuff. They probably played croquet. If they lived in the South, they'd have a subscription to Garden and Gun magazine. If you've never heard of Garden and Gun magazine, check it out. It's a thing. It's pretty great. So, yeah, Camilla grew up on the family's sprawling estate, and some of the land, I think, ended up being donated to the town of Westwood because you'll find Lyman Pond and also the Rice Reservation are in Westwood. When Cam's father, Arthur, died of cancer in 1968, Cam was devastated, and when their mother died 4 years later in 1972, it wasn't long before Cam sold the family estate and moved into a big old Victorian home on 40 acres in Hopkinton, Rhode Island, where there was plenty of space space to devote to breeding and showing dogs, especially Clumber Spaniels. This is a breed that I wasn't super familiar with, but I will post a photo. They're kind of a chonky, like sturdier Cocker Spaniel, super cute. According to Wikipedia, my new best friend, quote, "The Clumber Spaniel was developed in the United Kingdom. It is the largest of the Spaniels and comes in predominantly white with either lemon or orange markings. The name of the breed is taken from Clumber Park in Nottinghamshire, where the breed was first developed. It is a gun dog that specializes in hunting in heavy cover. They are gentle and loyal and can act aloof with strangers. They have several habits which could be considered disadvantages, including a constant shedding of its coat and snoring." End quote. So, all right, that last bit sounds a little bit like my husband. I love it. But yeah, Cam seemed to sincerely prefer the company of dogs to people, which is something else in common with my husband and with me.
And me.
Yeah, we like dogs. So Cam put up a large fence around the property, and around 1985, he legally changed his name from Camilla to Cam and began transitioning into a man. He had cut his hair and began taking steroids like testosterone that he could get because of its veterinary application and his breeding program. He grew a mustache, and standing at about 6 feet tall, he actually really looked a lot like his dad. He was reclusive, and he didn't seem to have much to do with his siblings, but I don't know it was necessarily out of any kind of animosity. The next closest sibling in age to him was a sister who was 6 years older. So he would have been 12 when she left for college or marriage or at that age. And then, of course, he'd have been even younger with his other sister and brother. But at this point, it seems like his only regular communication with them was Christmas cards every year. And I don't know that there was any kind of falling out. I'm not going to presume that there was, or any kind of negative feelings or issues. I will say that until the day they died, they all seemed to refer to Cam as their sister. And they only ever used the pronouns she and her. One of his sisters was quoted as saying, quote, "She was cute and perky. She began to withdraw from us in the 1970s. I don't know why." End quote.
I mean, it's different times. There was just way less understanding and knowledge about transgender issues.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we can all guess, at least in part, why he may have started to distance himself a bit. Most of the articles that you'll read that I found about this case, they refer to Cam as a transvestite or a cross-dresser or, cross-dressing millionaire. And it's just, it's very hurtful and demeaning and dismissive way to describe someone who is transgender today. Cam was a man stuck with a female body, and I don't know how open his family would have been to this, to his being transgender in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
It really seems to me like it's just been in the past couple of decades that we've thankfully seen this talked about more.
If even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'd say maybe the last 10 years maximum.
Yeah, probably. It's great because it's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed of, and I'm glad that it's becoming more, I don't know what the right word would be.
Accepted,
yeah. So, according to the National Center for Transgender Equality, quote, "Transgender people are people whose gender identity is different from the gender they were thought to be at birth. Trans is often used as shorthand for transgender. When we're born, a doctor usually says that we're male or female based on what our bodies look like. Most people who were labeled male at birth turn out to actually identify as men, and most people who were labeled female at birth grow up to be women. But some people's gender identity, their innate knowledge of who they are, is different from what was initially expected when they were born. Most of these people describe themselves as transgender. A transgender woman lives as a woman today, but was thought to be a male when she was born. A transgender man lives as a man today, but was thought to be a female when he was born. Some transgender people identify as neither male nor female, or as a combination of male and female. There are a variety of terms that people who aren't entirely male or entirely female use to describe their gender identity, like non-binary or genderqueer. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two different things. Gender identity refers to your internal knowledge of your own gender. For example, your knowledge that you're a man, a woman, or another gender. Sexual orientation has to do with whom you're attracted to. Like non-transgender people, transgender people can have any sexual orientation. For example, a transgender man, someone who lives as a man today, might be primarily attracted to other men and identify as a gay man, or may be primarily attracted to women and identify as a straight man, or have any other sexual orientation. End quote. So hopefully that explains it better than I could. I'm cisgendered and straight. This means I had female sex organs at birth, and I have always felt like a female, and I have, at least until this point in my life, never say never, I've only ever been attracted to men. So please don't think in any way that I'm trying to be an expert in explaining this, and I'm very sorry if I've gotten any of it wrong or omitted anything important, but I don't know, I think it must be a terribly hard thing to feel so at odds with your body, and I'm just so proud of my trans friends for giving themselves permission to be the person that they are. It's just, I think it's very hard, and especially in the 1930s until just really very recently, as we were saying, and as evidenced by the very few articles you can find on Cam's murder, because they're just so dismissive, and many of them made it seem like he was mentally ill. Being transgender is not a mental illness, but it can absolutely cause anxiety and depression or exacerbate any other mental health issues, just because you're constantly struggling with your core identity, and that's hard enough. Even if every other thing in your life is perfect, And just because a lot of us feel like being transgender is a new thing, well, I don't know us, but you know what I mean. People in society think, this is such a new fad, a new thing, but it's not. We just talk about it more openly now. We educate ourselves. We try to support the people we love. And there are historical accounts of trans people pretty much since people started being born on the regular. Some First Nations tribe have a third non-specific gender. It's not that unusual a thing. It's just that the society we live in didn't really give people the freedom and support to be themselves. In 1829, Joseph Lobdell was born as Lucy Ann Lobdell, but lived as Joseph, marrying a woman he loved, and they apparently roamed around with their pet bear. But it wasn't a happy ending. After 60 years living as a man, he was locked in an insane asylum where he would die. And I could tell you dozens of stories like this, showing how cruel society was, how people just didn't understand, and still don't in a lot of ways and in a lot of places. We really hope that's changing now, but there's still a lot of work to do. There have been an alarming number of trans women murdered lately, and it's deeply sad and troubling. These are people, they have people who love them, who depend on them. So I'm just really hoping these murders are solved and that those women get some justice.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like every other murder.
Exactly. All right. So, Cam was finally living the life he wanted, though he was described as being grumpier and more hot-tempered than before, not particularly friendly to the neighbors, which I imagine might have been a side effect of the steroids he was taking, because remember, he wasn't seeing a doctor to transition, he was taking medication that was intended for use by his dogs. I'm pretty even-tempered, I have a really long fuse, generally. It's not pretty when I blow, but I have a long fuse. And on steroids, I used to call it hulking out. I had such a short fuse, and I would get really irrationally angry about just ridiculous things. I threw a bag of licorice once at a retail person at a Harry and David store at Christmas, and I'm sorry if you're listening. I apologize. But yeah, steroids can make you so irrationally angry. And I just think also probably everyone who should have loved and supported him was kind of treating him like a crazy lady going through a phase. You know what I mean? I can't imagine.
I mean, it's dangerous too. I have a very dear friend who is transgender, and she told me that when she was a teenager and wanted to start transitioning, she found support in a trans online community. Because even though she's only now in her early 20s, so that's not that long ago, and there was not that much support in real life, at least outside of the big cities here in Austria. And apparently she told me she met someone online who helped her by getting her hormones. Taking hormones without medical advice must be so unbelievably stressful for the body. I can't even imagine.
Absolutely. And not to mention that female to male trans kids can really hurt themselves trying to bind breasts and make other body modifications. And as you said, just taking iffy medication that you're not really sure what the source is. So it's so important that trans people are able to have the medical and emotional support that they need to be healthy, which is what we want for our trans friends, that they just be happy and healthy, same as everyone else we love. So...
Exactly.
Before we get to the macabre, we just need to take a quick break and tell you about today's sponsor, Podcorn.
Having a podcast is expensive, paying for hosting fees and the equipment we need to make this podcast sound like we're in a room with you and not 4,000 miles apart. It's not cheap.
What, they just don't want to listen to us screaming into an echo chamber?
Nope.
Fair enough. One way we've been able to pay the bills so that we aren't losing as much money on the show is with the help of Podcorn, and they're an incredibly easy way to find sponsors that you're happy to help promote.
With Podcorn, there's no middleman. Podcasts of all sizes can browse their easy-to-navigate marketplace and choose opportunities, set their own rates, and collaborate with brands directly.
You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn supports you at every step to ensure you're protected and compensated for the ads you create and run.
If you have a podcast, click the link in our show notes to sign up to Podcorn and start browsing sponsorship opportunities today.
Thanks, Podcorn. All right, so now Camilla is legally Cam. He's living his best life. He's breeding and showing dogs, particularly those Clumber Spaniels. I wonder if any of our listeners have a Clumber Spaniel. I bet we'll get some pictures.
We have listeners with wallabies and axolotls.
Someone's got a Clumber. Where are the Clumber Spaniel people? Yeah. So, but yeah, he's pretty reclusive and really only leaves the property to show dogs. He has an attaché case containing valuable jewelry collection and cash, which he's known to sleep with and take everywhere with him. So I looked up the difference between a briefcase and an attaché case, and I'm honestly still not totally sure what the difference is. I think that an attaché case opens like an accordion file, and a briefcase is just an empty rectangle, but don't quote me on that. Either way, it doesn't sound like the most comfortable thing to sleep with, and the fact that he was sleeping it at all, it just indicates to me that he didn't feel like he could trust those around him not to rob him.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And although he was a bit of an eccentric shut-in, same, he did have a close circle of friends, as well as some staff who helped to manage the property and the dogs. His best friend was George O'Neill, who was a dog breeder from North Kingston, Rhode Island. George was really helpful to Cam, and eventually Cam made him power of attorney, and he helped care for the 50 to 60 dogs on the property. Which, again, I wish Cam was my neighbor. Can I see the puppies and try on the jewelry? Maybe at the same time? Make a girl's dream come true? No. In any case, Cam didn't have a weirdo like me watching his back in a borrowed tiara. He just had George, who was helping with the dogs, and banking, and who would pick up his mail, that sort of thing. He was also the beneficiary in Cam's will. I know. As soon as we mentioned the will, it's like, bum, bum, bum. Okay. So it's Christmas 1987 when either someone close to the family or one of Cam's siblings became worried when they didn't receive their usual Christmas card. Cam's sister wrote a letter to Cam, but when months passed with no reply, Cam's brother and sisters began to really worry, and in August of 1988, they hired a Boston-based private investigator by the name of Charles John Allen to try to find out what had happened to Cam. He had 3 first names, so you know he wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the good ones.
So, of course, the investigator, he goes over to see Cam's BFF, George O'Neill, and George says that in July of 1987, he and Cam had argued over the phone about registration papers for a dog show in Canada that hadn't arrived on time, and Cam hung up on him, and that the next day, he went over to Cam's house and found him gone with the front door wide open and the phone ripped off the wall. George tells the investigator he thought Cam had gone to the UK for a sex change operation and said it wasn't unusual for Cam to be away for months at a time, which is why he had power of attorney so that he could care for his dogs and bills and things like that while he was away. George O'Neill insists he had nothing to do with Cam disappearing, he just carried on taking care of Cam's affairs. So Alan, the investigator, he's like, "Can I search the property?" And George O'Neill is like, "Nope.
Okay, here are several alarm bells ringing. Like, if you go over to the house of your friend or your neighbor and you see the phone ripped out and the door wide open, you're just like, he must have gone off to England. Let's just keep going on like nothing happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I would call the police, wouldn't you? Or the family.
Yes. And I don't like the fact that he says, I think he went to England for a sex change operation. Because then he's almost, at this time in the 80s, it would have almost been like, oh, well, I'm not going to get involved in this. Do you know what I mean?
Like, this person is not stable and...
Exactly. Yeah.
Can't be trusted and like, he's a little bit cuckoo. That's what people would assume if they hear that. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. It's a little bit victim blamey.
It's so victim blaming because if he goes away all the time for business with the dogs, why wouldn't you just say he travels all the time to do business with the kennel? So it's not unusual. You don't need to say he went for a sex change operation. That's well, more on that later. So the private investigator, he reaches out to his contacts in the UK who are in the trans community, and they report back that no, there's been absolutely no sign of Cam anywhere in London. So in December of 1988, with no other leads to follow, Cam's family report him missing to the police. George Whedon was the police chief in Hopkinton at the time, and he went to Lyman's home and spoke with George O'Neill. And apparently he believed George's story that Cam had just left for the UK and sexual reassignment surgery because he did not search the property or pursue any further lines of investigation. So eventually, having done everything they could, Cam's siblings went to court to have their sister, Camilla, declared legally dead. I think they had felt that O'Neill had done something and was now living off Cam's money. So there was approximately $4 million worth of antiques and jewelry that were missing, as well as a bunch of like stocks that had been sold. And then another $2 million was in the family trust. And I think payments were coming in like on the regular from the trust. And so the family just wanted to be sure that that money stayed in the family and O'Neill wasn't just, hadn't murdered their sister to
leeching off.
Yeah, exactly. And then was leeching. So they insisted that Cam would never have left his dogs for that long, especially his companion dog, who was just always at his side.
Oh, this makes so much sense. I can think of a lot of people, us included. We would never leave our dogs just like that. That would be a huge red flag. If you ever come across my house with the doors open and my dog's there.
Yeah, it's madness. Exactly. Yeah. And to give you just an idea of why I found this case so sad. So I'm going to read you some snippets from a December 30th, 1994 article for the LA Times. The title of the article is Mystery Shrouds Millionaire's Disappearance. Enigma. Cam Lyman looked and acted like a man. To some, she vanished as a cover for a sex change, but her sisters think she's dead. By Elizabeth Marin. Quote, the two sisters of the eccentric multimillionaire dog breeder have taken steps to have Lyman declared dead, but O'Neill thinks his friend may have slipped off that summer day in 1987 to have a sex change operation. Quote, she'd been talking about it for years, end quote, O'Neill said Wednesday from his home in North Kingston, Rhode Island. With her close-cropped hair, her mustache, and her habit of dressing in men's clothes, Lyman, quote, looked better as a guy than a woman anyway, O'Neill said. The family of the woman, who had her name legally shortened from Camilla, believes she was kidnapped and murdered, said the lawyer for Lyman's sisters. Barry Mills of Ellsworth, Maine, said a worldwide search had produced no trace of the missing millionaire. Mills also said he is disgusted with the prurient interest the case has generated, and the week after Christmas he complained the case has been the buzz of New England. Quote, when I think of the cases that we have handled, where people have been injured or killed and no one gives a damn, it just makes me sick, Mills said. Then someone says sex change and everyone gets excited. It's ridiculous. End quote. In the meantime, Mills said other events will no doubt sweep the case out of the limelight. Quote, the OJ trial starts next week, he said. Maybe people will start focusing on that. End quote.
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
Couple of things here.
Uh-huh.
First of all, why would he hide having a gender reassignment surgery? He was not hiding the fact that he was a trans man. So first of all.
Yep.
Then, about the thing where, what was it? Nobody gives a damn about the other case and it makes Mills sick, yeah? I mean, look, there are many cases that spark a lot of interest by the public because they have this certain detail that gets people excited. You know what I mean with excited. While other cases, devastating cases, are never really discussed. I mean, it is what it is.
It is. Yeah.
In 1995, that's only or already 25 years ago, however you want to see it, I can imagine that a reclusive transgender millionaire coming from old money was very intriguing. That's a fact.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And the last thing, I hate the quote, "he looked better as a man anyway," end quote part. Like, shut the fuck up, will you?
I know.
Jesus.
I know. He's the worst. He sounded like the entire investigation, like he just couldn't have given a single fuck about his best friend at all, right? Like, that's the thing that makes me so sad. In June of 1995, Cam's siblings were no doubt relieved when Hopkinton probate court judge Linda Urso declared Cam to be legally dead and the trust fund money would be protected, with O'Neill receiving Cam's house and land in Hopkinton, and I think the rest of the stuff went back to his family. There was a lot of legalese around this case, and I think the trustees of the family estate sued O'Neill, and then the IRS came after him for years of unpaid taxes on Cam's estate. So where did that money go?
Good.
Right? And also especially because I read, it was just one source I read, but it said that George O'Neill was a tax attorney as well as a dog breeder. So if that's the case, it just makes the mismanagement of the estate money seem even more suspicious, right? Because a tax attorney should know enough to know. You don't I would accidentally not pay the IRS for 3 years. This guy, no. You know what I mean? So it just, I don't know. It just all seems so suspicious. But the siblings were successful in keeping the money out of George's hands. In an article for the Washington Post, Terrence Petty, and shout out to Terrence Petty, he wrote most of the articles I read for a bunch of different newspapers for this case. I think Terrence Petty probably knows more about it than anybody. So he writes, quote, "In her written ruling, Urso wrote that there were some, quote, disturbing facts surrounding her absence, and that O'Neill's testimony during the proceedings was not wholly credible. Quote, the circumstances surrounding Lyman's disappearance as described by Mr. O'Neill are sketchy, and his actions for a long period of time thereafter are unsettling. End quote, Urso wrote, noting that he continued to run Lyman's affairs as if nothing had happened.
It must have been a relief for the family.
Oh, absolutely. And I know I get upset on Cam's behalf, but I do think that Cam's family, his siblings, I think they genuinely loved him. They just didn't understand him, and I'm not judging, you know. I'd also be doing my damnedest to make sure someone I thought hurt someone I loved didn't profit financially as a result. You know, I'm just really glad that they were able to get that resolved. They put a marker on the family plot. More on that later, but there was no body.
So that happens. I often don't understand my sister, and I want to tell her exactly how to lead her life because I love her and I'm older and I want the best for her. And I think low-key that's how they must have felt.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think Cam's family did love him. They just did not understand him.
Yeah.
And you know, they wouldn't have been alone with trans families at that time, even the best intended families. All right, so now we're going to go ahead 2 years. A new couple buys the house. They're also dog breeders, and the house with the land and the kennels, it's all perfect for them. It's also around this time that the new police chief, John Scuncio, a retired state police detective, he reopens Cam's cold case, and he gets permission from the couple to go ahead and search the property, which they give to him, no problem. Then, on September 24th, 1997, it's a crisp early fall day, and one of the owners of the property notices a bad smell, and they're worried that there might be an issue with the septic tank. So, really quick for those unfamiliar with a septic tank, some houses are connected to town sewers, but in other towns there's no sewer system. So like Cape Cod is all septic systems, and you've basically just got a big tank buried in the ground on your property, and all of your wastewater goes into it. And when it's done properly, you don't need it pumped. But there's lots of things you're not supposed to use, right? So no garbage disposal, you're not supposed to use liquid fabric softener, no flushing feminine products. You know, you can have an issue. So you might get a bad smell, which it's hand in hand with septic systems. Like, that's not going to smell good, but you shouldn't really smell anything unless there's a problem or if the tank is open, right? And so they're getting a smell of something bad, and they don't know whether the tank needs pumping. Is there an issue? So they go and they open up the tank, and there, staring up at them, is a skull. Fortunately, the police chief was nearby searching on another part of the property when they found the remains. It took a year to confirm that the skeletal remains found in the septic tank were Cam's, as everyone suspected. The cause of death was murder. I only read one account that said that he had been shot in the head and then weighed down with a cinder block, but this is absolutely unconfirmed. That's a rumor. Most of what I found makes me think the police are being guarded with information just in case they ever do have a lead on what might have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read something else where one of his sisters was saying that she wasn't so concerned with who had murdered him. She was just really happy to finally have her sibling to lay to rest.
Yeah, I totally get that. I always say that families need closure, and I'm so glad that they got it in the end.
Agreed. Yep. But sadly, Cam's last wishes could not be carried out. So we were just talking about this, weren't we? About making sure that your family knows what your last wishes were. And
That's true. We just talked about it.
Yeah, don't make it anything too tricky. This is why I think Cam and I would have been friends. So, in a 1998 article for the New England Wire Service, Mark Arsenal writes, quote, her will stated she wanted to be cremated and her ashes dropped over Madison Square Garden during the Westminster Kennel Club's Best in Show contest. Unfortunately, her wishes could not be fulfilled, and in October of 1998, she was buried in a small poplar box in front of a headstone bearing her chiseled name and a carving of a German short-haired pointer, Lyman's first champion breed, end quote.
That's so eccentric. I love it.
I know.
And it's also interesting that they went with a German pointer and not the Clumber Spaniel.
Yes, right? So I thought that was interesting too. And it made me think that they were doing these things for the little sister they remember, right? And not the man that he'd grown up to be, because they all would have been like on their way into adulthood when Cam was born. You know what I mean? So I wonder, was the German pointer the first dog that he had bred? I just think a lot of things that are calling back to Cam's childhood and his siblings' memories of him,
Which, it makes sense from the siblings' point of view. They remembered the time in Cam's life when they knew him best.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like my mom really didn't know a whole lot about me after the age of 19, and she just now starts to get to know me a little bit better again.
That's nice. I like that.
So, do we know who killed Cam?
Okay. In 2003, George O'Neill was convicted of embezzling money from Cam, but only $15,000 of the estimated $4 million missing from the estate. So he got a year of probation and had to pay $450 in court fees, and that was it. He died in 2011, so if he was the murderer, he got away with it. But I have to mention, there were other staff. There were staff. I think there was a couple who worked as like housekeeper, caretakers, helped take care of the dogs. And then other people in his close circle who would regularly be in and out of the house and who would have known about the attaché case full of money and stocks and jewelry. But I think it had to have been someone who spent a lot of time on the property. Like maybe the caretakers. Like there are certain people that it just makes sense it would have had to be because they knew where the septic system tank was. So when I moved from Wayland, which was a town with septic, not sewers, I had to get in Massachusetts, you have to get what's called a Title V inspection. So you have to spend quite a bit of money when you go to sell your house. And a company comes out to inspect your septic system to confirm that's in good working order, because a new septic system will cost you at least $20,000, right? It's really expensive. So it's important that you make sure it's in working order before you can sell your house. I lived in that house for 12 years and never known. I had no idea where the septic tank opening was until I had the Title V done. My parents have been in the same house for over 30 years, and I'm certain my dad knows where the septic tank is, but I don't. It's just not something that's clearly marked. You know what I mean? There's no, like, septic tank flag, or there's just nothing. You just wouldn't know unless you know. You'd have to be familiar with the property to hide a body in there. I also read that O'Neill allegedly began showing Cam's dogs as his own when he disappeared, which I also found very suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if it wasn't George O'Neill, then it just makes me sad to say it would have been another one of the few people Cam trusted, which is sad, right? It's just sad. And that is the unsolved murder of millionaire dog breeder Cam Lyman.
Thank you, Annie. I have never heard about this case, and I agree with you. It definitely must have been someone who knew the property well enough.
Yeah.
And it is truly sad. He was already a recluse, not opening up to a whole lot of people, and even this small circle could not be trusted.
I know.
But if you think about it, this happens a lot of time, especially with wealthy and or famous people. At one point they start to lead a reclusive life for whatever reason, and then they get under the influence of the wrong person or the wrong group, and they are taken advantage of.
Yep.
It's sad, and it must be a lonely life, Hashtag Free Britney.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I'm just glad because dogs, they don't care about your money. They don't care about your looks. They don't care if your house is spotless or if you gain 5 pounds.
Yeah.
They just love you unconditionally. And Cam did have his dogs, and I'm super glad for that.
Yeah, me too. And I can also understand. I think that's probably a big part of why he was so drawn to the dogs. So, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I hope you found that interesting, and I just never really heard of it. And, yeah. All right. Something good. That was a sad one.
Should I start? Mine is super quick.
Please.
So my something good this week, I told you last week my husband is home now, and we had so many appointments because we got our piece of land, and now we can truly start the planning phase, and next spring we will start construction. And I hope it will be an exciting phase, and I will make sure to share the journey with you guys. I know it's so weird for me. I should be super happy and excited, but I obviously can't right now because my emotions are all over the place, but they're not in the happy and excited part.
Yeah,
but I will get there.
That's okay.
I will.
You will get there. And the initial stages are less happy and excited and more, it's a lot of hurry up and wait when you start building something. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's okay. By the time you're ready to feel excited again, it'll be the right time. I'm just excited for you. It took ages to get confirmation that you got the land, so I'm just really happy that you finally have it.
But now something very important. You did watch the Burbs, right?
We did. We enjoyed it. It was cute. I liked it.
Cute? How can you say it was cute?
It was cute. I mean, it's funny because I remembered when we started watching it, I had flashed back to sitting at the house where my mom and my aunt grew up on Melha Avenue in Springfield, and sitting in the little den right on the floor in front of the TV and watching the Burbs. And I think I got scared and had to shut it off. But I really did enjoy it. And I didn't know, Paul told me as we were watching it, that the poodle in it was in Silence of the Lambs. It's the same poodle that played Precious.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Apparently it's the same. That poodle gets around.
But you know that the street that they used as filming location, it's on the Universal lot, right?
Yes, and there's like the Cleaver's house and the...
Yeah, and the Munsters, I think, and Desperate Housewives.
Yep. It was, No, I loved that. I thought that was great. It was, I enjoyed it very much. Yeah. So my something good, I don't know if I've recommended it on the show or not. I probably have, but I want to recommend the comedy Best in Show, which is one of my favorite films, as are all of the Christopher Guest films. So enjoyable, so funny. If you're a dog lover and you haven't seen it, please see Best in Show. I'm constantly singing God Loves a Terrier, like loud and off key. Every time we pass one, like driving, I'll just,
I've never seen it. I'm a dog lover. I will watch it.
You have to. You will love it. You and Philip should watch it. You'll both love it.
Okay.
It's absolutely. It's so good. So, thanks so much for listening to your favorite international true crime podcast. This is the part of the show where I beg you, please, to leave just the quickest of reviews. Just one word would be super. It's such a help.
Sincerely thank you to everyone who has taken the time to write a review on iTunes. It's just the best way for people to find us, because then you get suggested, things you might also enjoy, stuff like that. And honestly, it always makes our day when we read a nice review. So thank you. And some of you write such lovely reviews, like
so nice,
so elaborate. I'm always like, wow.
Yeah. No, me too. It really does make our day. And also, please come say hi in our Facebook group. It really is a great spot. Just all kinds of topics and memes, murder related, but also just all manner of weird stuff. There's just zero politics, and there's a pin post for COVID-19 stuff. So if you want to avoid real life, come by and say hi. It's a pretty great corner of the interwebs.
Did you see the post with people who, all the arts and creative stuff they are doing? Like, Jesus Christ, they are all so creative and
amazing,
talented.
It's not
I want
surprising
to buy things from all of them.
I know. We need to start a pinned post for everybody's Etsy shops. Yeah, people are amazing.
Tell your dogs and your cats and all the creatures you love out there. We said hi. We love them very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And until next week, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.